cost for the exam. To get a license in this state, you have to pay a very high annual fee of, well, initially it's 150 plus 75, so that would be 225. But to get that license, you also have to have malpractice insurance. So to get malpractice insurance, you have to join either an association or you can maybe buy the insurance. So you're looking at a cost between maybe $129 and $250 to get your malpractice insurance. So you have those two. Then you have the cost of the exam, which is another additional expense.
Can I just ask, what malpractice, is that an annual fee of $250?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to.
If you join like the AMTA or the ABMP, you have to pay an annual fee, and as part of that annual fee, you obtain this malpractice. Every year, when our licensees renew, they have to sign an act that they're continuing having their malpractice, which means they would still have to pay for that. So I'm just thinking on the tip of my head, you're costing $700 to $750 to get a license in this day. I know people over there are smiling and nodding.
They are.
Yeah, because it's the truth. And so we have to decide if indeed this test helps us out that much for licensure. I've always been an advocate of approving schools, having something in place that would ensure that the individuals, I know how it works in other states, like if a graduate comes from a Massachusetts school and goes to Washington State, the school you go to has to go through a process to get approved by them. Not that you're operating in the state, but get approved by them so that the applicant will be recognized, their diploma will be recognized. And I know that, it's a burden on the school, but it's not a burden if you're running, a reputable school. So I've always been an advocate for school standards. The other thing is, what people are probably not aware of, is a lot of states, if they require you to take the national certification, they don't require you to keep it up. So in other words, if it's just to get your license, you could just take it and then forget about it. Because I've read 3 or 4 bills and nowhere does it say you have to continue. So maybe they're just using it as a way to get a license. And my fourth issue, and my most important issue, sorry, because I'm very passionate about it, is IEP students. I have issues with people with learning disabilities because I believe that schools have the ability of training properly an IEP student. That's someone who has, an educational plan in place. These testing services do not, because if they're farming that out to a Sylvan or a, I don't know the other ones, they're going to have a proctor sitting there and you take the exam. They might supply you with a reader, or they might supply you with extra time, but there's a lot of other requirements for ADA that maybe someone reads it every other word backwards, or maybe they have a lot of other, and I happen to know of some people that have done really well in schools and have flunked that test 5 times. Not because they don't know the information, but because they can't take the test. And I'm not, and I'm not saying, I don't know how they deal with it in other professions. I don't know, I'm sure a lot of other professions have to take exams. And I don't know the type of but I'm always an advocate of a student who has issues with taking tests. I think it's a multiple choice and a true-false test. And that sometimes is the worst test for people with learning issues. Because it becomes a test issue, not a knowledge. Am I making any sense? I mean, so those are the 4 reasons why I have no interest in the exam. It doesn't mean that I won't entertain discussion. And I might change my mind, but those are my reasons. So,
one of the missions of this board, and I know that we all know it, is that it's the protection of the public. So I understand that we do take into consideration the licensees and the effect that whatever decisions we have, that we make, have on the licensees. However, your main focus has to be on what it will take to protect the public. And all those, the concerns that you have are valid, and certainly the board can take that into consideration in making your decision, but I just don't want your focus to be just on the licensees and how difficult things are on the licensees, because that's not what your mission is. Your mission is to consider what will it take as part of the licensing process to ensure that the public is properly protected. There are across the board, the majority of the professions at this agency. I'm not sure if there are any that don't, but the majority of the professions do require some type of an exam. And I believe that there are people with learning disabilities as part of all of these professions. There are accommodations that need to be made when people have learning disabilities. I'm not sure what those accommodations would need to be, but the board can certainly spell that out as part of a contract to ensure that these people are adequately protected. You do have to also consider that if these individuals are unable to take the exam, is it a reflection of a greater problem? Is there something else that may cause a problem regarding practice issues? Or is it just that they can't take the exam, and what is it that we can do for these individuals? If the exam is actually the issue, what it is that we can do, whether it's some type of a waiver, some type of a process that we can have, if they have a documented learning disability. You also mentioned the malpractice insurance and licensing fees and all of these other issues. But that's certainly something that the board can take into consideration when these people come in to the board and you discuss it with them, see what other accommodations they have. Malpractice insurance was what was required by this board. I know that a number of other boards also require malpractice insurance, and that's basically to protect the public.
So, yes, you done?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it seems like we're going to have an interesting discussion for a few months. Yeah, I agree, Hank, that it's very important to take care of people who have talent and they're a different kind of learner, and doing certain kinds of exams don't work for them. And they would be excellent practitioners, and there isn't any other problems with them. They're great, but they just don't take tests well. And I would be for one of the values of the NCB, the FSMT, the Federation, is they're open to input from us because they are us. I mean, they're made up of us, and that was the whole reason why it was formed, because the NCB was so rigid. Now the NCB is nervous because the NBLEX has now grown like a giant, like in a few years. So now they're listening too. And they also have better people in there, and they're listening. So I think we could exert influence to have that change, and I think that would be a very, very good thing.
Yeah. Have you taken both exams?
No, I haven't taken both, because
I've taken either?
Oh yeah, I took them several times.
Which one?
I've taken the NCB several times.
Okay, not the NBLEX.
No, the NBLEX, I mean, I've been licensed for.
No, I understand, I just want to find something, I just want to see.
My son took the NBLEX, and he thought it was a good exam.
Good exam?
Good exam, and actually I heard that it's a little bit more difficult even than the NCB exam, which I liked.
Okay.
So another thing is that I earn more money than some doctors, and the doctors pay about $200,000 a year, some of them, for insurance. I think our insurance is a joke in terms of how much it costs. You join an association for $200, you get not only insurance for millions of dollars, but you get magazines, you get discounts, you get conferences, you get a lot of stuff. So I think the cost, if you're a massage therapist and you can't afford your license every year, and your insurance, and the cost of an exam, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So I think if you're trained well, if you have good talent, if you have good business training, you're gonna make a decent living. And I think that's just part of being a professional and part of protecting the public. I think that some of the people that this board sees, we would not be seeing if they had to take that exam, frankly, that we have some questions about. Or they would have to come up higher in order to make it, to enter the profession. And I think that's a good thing. So, that's on that. And one last thing, it's portable. The whole thing about portability is really, people move like crazy, and it is a drag to get licensed in another state. And you can't do it if you're from Massachusetts without a total drag. You want to be able to have a license that is everywhere, and that's the whole idea of the Federation, is that you can move anywhere and you can have the same license, just like that. And I think that's a huge benefit.
The different states will have to have some type of reciprocity.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and oftentimes what the exam does, and this is with other professions as well, so you wouldn't have to start all over again, because they waive a lot of the requirements
if you've got the test.
If you've taken an exam, oftentimes that's what they use as the minimum.
And it's healthy for a board to have different opinions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. We have to look at the whole.
And I think, like if you were going to the FSMT, the Federation meeting, if we had a representative there, this could have been brought up a long time ago, and I think they're open to it. You know, and I think they are trying to accommodate some ADA things, and it's probably
And as contemporaries starting out about the same time, I had the same issue with national certification when they started. They weren't listening, they were causing us all kinds of issues. But I do know that some of us are in a different position where we could be saying, well, yeah, it's not a big deal to you because you're successful and you have money. So, I mean, I think it's important that we talk about all the massage therapists. And I also know that we're not supposed to, I know you said we're supposed to think about the public health safety and all that, but we're also not supposed to inhibit someone's ability to practice as well. So I think that we have to look at all sides of the picture and put everything on the table and hash it out, because I think if we put all the facts, then we can make a decision. The issue with security, that was an easy one for us, because if we couldn't prove who was
Well, now
taking
that's taken
it,
care of.
right, so then that was so easy, we said, forget it, but now it's a whole different.
That's a big issue, yeah.
Right, now it's
Well, now
different.
changed. They listened, you know, they changed that, and so, let's get some of them to come in, and then let's have the facts.
But
like
the other
you said.
point you brought up, which I think is also important, Michael deals with all the applications. Is it something that would help the office processing questionable candidates? I guess I could ask you that question. In other words, if there was an example, I know it's a,
Yeah, it's hard to say because you don't know how many people would pass it. I mean, I think if it's true that they went to a poor school that didn't teach them anything and they couldn't pass the exam, yes, that would happen.
And it was kind of, they had schools to get better or to get out.
could they pass the test without going to school? You think that-
But also, we have a requirement that in
There's
order to
always
take.
gonna be people who could pass an exam without necessarily going to school, I mean,
Yeah, well, I
But we
know-
could require that they go to school in order to take the exam. Well, that's what they're thinking. You require, the board requires they go to a school in order to even apply. So they have to have both. They can't just take the exam.
Well, they have to have the hours, 650 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a question I have, is does the exam require 500 hours, 650 hours? Does, not at all?
It really was, well, it depends. The FSM, the National Certification Exam requires, I think, 500 hours. The other one says, we're the boards. Each board will require different amounts of hours. We're giving you a good test that we spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on, and we maintain thousands of items and questions and test them, which is a tough thing to do. And that's what we're doing. You, as a board, require 1,000 hours, 500 hours, whatever you want, and we're providing a good test.
I'm a little confused about the certification, I guess, exam, is that one is kind of throwing me off, because generally when the boards require someone to take an exam, it's a one-time exam, you take the exam, as long as you renew your license, you can, you maintain your license, you're all set, you never have to take it again.
You don't have to.
But you're saying with the certification exam, it's, you take it and the exam is good for 4 years.
Okay,
Who
let me explain.
decides
Well, let me
what's,
explain. It's different.
what's
It's a
good
very
for 4
different,
years?
it's a different thing. You see, a certification exam is an exam to certify you as a certain knowledge base that you have.
Mhm.
And the reason that states use that is that no federation exam existed.
Okay,
Most places have an exam that has nothing to do with certification.
okay.
That's the argument really that they're making. There's a board exam. When you're going to be a doctor, you take a certain board exam, period. And to be certified as higher levels of specialization, you have to maintain it like with CPR. You've got to maintain it, just like if you want to say you're certified, you have to take the test every 4 years. So that's inappropriate for our purposes. Our purposes, we want to know that somebody went to school, they know the information, period. So taking either exam once, I think, is good enough.
Okay.
Does that help you?
The
Yeah.
certification word is misleading.
Mhm.
They don't certify anyone. It's an exam. And that's an issue that we had 25 years ago, is this national certification doesn't mean anything. It's an exam. It doesn't take the place of the school. So that, I understand your confusion, because I think it can, people would call us up and say, I'm nationally certified. So I would say, did you go to school? No. I said, well, where'd you get this now? Oh, I took the national certification exam. So I
Wait,
think
wait,
that
wait,
was
how can you
misleading.
do that? You can't take the
Oh,
exam
you
without a
could.
certain amount of hours
You could.
of training.
You could before.
Well, maybe not now.
You didn't have to,
Portfolio review.
yeah, you could take the.
You could have courses in different places.
Right, but you didn't have to have,
Go to
yeah,
school.
you could have taken it from Auntie Mae's,
Right, that's true, but now I think it's different.
Now, we had discussion earlier also, way back a few years ago. There were two exams, an entry-level exam and a higher level exam.
Now, no, actually now they have two exams. They now have an advanced exam, because again, it's a certifying body for different kinds of skill.
Right.
They're having a more advanced and a basic exam.
Okay.
But I don't think that applies for our purposes. We want someone who can take a basic exam, period.
I think that was the discussion we had, and I think the security became an issue. I think the other issue, and I don't recall the nuances, our council back then, something about the level of control over the organization that was administering the exam. Now, part of it was purchasing, I had to go through and that's a very mechanical and easy thing to do.
We don't have control over the actual vendor. They enter into a contract with us, we tell them what they expect, they tell us what they'll do for us as well as what they expect of us. We don't have control over them. What some professions do is that they have specific, they call it jurisprudence exam, where it's state specific, and then sometimes the boards are able to, they'll have like specific questions that, or whether it's an essay or whatever it is, that these people have to take and pass as well. And that's specific to the state and the state requirements. But as far as a national exam, we do not have control over them. What you may be able to do, and I guess that's part of being a member of the Federation, is that you have, there's a delegate, so there's a voting delegate. I don't know if you get to look at the exams, what specific input you would have in that particular exam.
You can join the item writing committee, you can be on different committees that have a lot of input into the exam.
So
And
is
so I don't
that
know
made
if
up
the-
of states then?
Yeah.
It's the state boards. The
It's us.
Federation is the state board, so you basically vote and weigh in on whether it's the exam or the operation of the organization, so you have a say in that, but generally people have to volunteer for that. So that's what that organization is for.
Like it's-
I'm not sure about the national certification.
No, you have nothing to do with it.
But I guess David's question is, if we agree to, and let's just say, is that, we just have to vote on it, and they say, fine, they can do their thing, or do we have to have some sort of, I think there's some sort of issues with control? I guess I'm
No,
confused.
yeah, we don't have that.
Well, that was just, the national certification was the only, excuse me, entity in existence when we first started.
Mhm.
And they had no flexibility.
Mhm.
The Federation does have flexibility so that we could, in our procurement, we could specify, there'd be 6 questions on Massachusetts regulations.
Well, I don't think that you can do that because it's a national exam, so everyone is taking every state is taking the same exam. You can't expect someone in California to be knowledgeable about Massachusetts law. What you're talking about is more of a jurisprudence exam that is specific to the state. That's something separate
different.
that you would probably end up having to come up with those questions and implement that. And we just don't have the resources to do that because
Very
then you also
expensive.
have to have a bank of questions. You can't ask the same question always. They have all that worked out. That's why we contract with vendors to be able to provide that information. But Peter's the procurement person at this agency, so he
That's why I've
has
been raising my
more.
hand, trying to jump
Oh,
in here.
jump in.
I'm the procurement attorney for the entire division. So there are a couple of questions that I'd respond to. So normally what the board would do is they'd select the exam that they wanted to administer, and then DPL and the board would contract with a third-party provider to administer the exam. And in the normal course, unless we were a member of the Federation, you would not have input into the content of the exam. If you wanted to have a jurisprudence exam, other boards do that. You as a board would be responsible for drafting those questions and then contracting to have the administrator of the exam administer that part of it as well. Yes.
When you say administer,
Yes.
do you mean the testing site?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
So it would have
The
to
person
be,
who collects the fee, provides the terminal if it's a computer-based exam, the location.
so would it be the, I want to ask a question before I forget. So
Yeah.
it would have to be the same testing site? Because right now, people can take the test in various sites throughout.
It's unrealistic, we're never gonna do it, because it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to create an exam, to have banks of questions, you have to.
No, we're talking about.
Any kind of exam, it would cost.
What do you mean what do you mean by the testing site?
In
Where
other
they go to
words,
take the
right
test.
now, if
Uh-huh.
you sign up for the national certifications, you
Mhm.
send in your money, you fill out your form. I live in Boston, they say, fine, go to Sylvan Learning Center on Portland Street in Boston, I'm just making that up. And then you go and you take a test. So my question
No.
is, do we be able to have the flexibility of taking this exam in different sites in Massachusetts, or it have to be one site?
it would not have to be one site. It would be based on Massachusetts procurement laws. We would send it out to bid. It would go to the lowest cost bidder. You can take into consideration as well the number of sites that it is offered. But you would not be sending people off to Sylvan. The Commonwealth would have a contract with a particular provider. It could be Sylvan, but it could be somebody else. And we would tell them to go to this site to take the exam, because that's the person with whom we have the contract, and therefore we have control, among other things, over the quality that's done. If the exam is not proctored properly, we have recourse against that provider, whereas if you just send somebody up to Sylvan, you as a board have no quality control over the administration of the exam. The other thing that you should be aware of is that the Commonwealth, as part of its standard terms and conditions, has accessibility requirements that actually exceed the Americans with Disabilities Act. And those are part of any contract that would be entered into by TPL and you as a board. You should understand, because I know this both from reviewing the contracts and representing other boards, accessibility requirements are only as good as the person who's asking for the accommodation. So sometimes people with disabilities don't ask for the accommodation, and so it can fall down on that part of it. But the requirements that the Commonwealth imposes are quite extensive.
Hey, can you give us an analogous situation with another board, please?
Sure. So, I don't know, the physical therapist? Yeah, Melody just came back from their conference. So, yeah, the physical therapists take an exam, which is administered by a national board of the National Federation of State Boards of Physical Therapists.
Same deal.
Yep, that some of the board members have, through their academic, actually, lives, have affiliations with and have some input into the drafting of the questions, not complete input, because you're dealing with, in this case, 50 jurisdictions. So, you know, the Massachusetts board does not have total control, and nor would they, or should they. But we contract with PCS, I believe. Who's Elizabeth with?
PCS,
PCS, and our contract with them actually.
Professional Credentialing Services.
Yeah, so they're a national organization that really does test administration. They do some test development, but so they obtain the test from the national board. They administer it at their sites. PCS, under our contract with them, they actually do the application collection. They collect all of the application fees. They do the review, and actually an administrator there, if it's a she, has any questions, she refers them to our administrator, so that we only get the difficult questions really that come up, and then otherwise an application that has no questions, no problems, no issues or concerns, really goes through without actually dealing with any DPL staff until the issuance of the license.
And the signing of the wall certificate.
Yeah.
So someone passes a physical therapy exam, comes to the board for an app, for license. What level of review is beyond just the exam, passing the exam, does the physical therapy board do?
The application goes through PCS. So PCS collects the applications, they require all the information. If the person's licensed in another state, they require them to provide them with the licensure verification from the other state.
They collect the transcripts if it's an original
Who sets the
application.
fees, Peter?
Fees for what?
The exam.
PCS,
It's whatever fees they charge.
Yeah.
We don't get the fees, the money doesn't come to
But
us.
I guess my question is, national cert, how much does it cost to take the exam? I don't really know.
It's about $200.
How much is MPLEX? Is MPLEX different?
No, it's about the same. It costs a lot to administer.
I know, but
Yeah.
who sets that?
yeah, so when PCS bid on its contract, it said, we'll do this whole thing for whatever, $300 an applicant or something like that. So they give us an apples to apples comparison, so that when we have multiple bidders, we look and we pick what is the lowest cost for the applicant to pay. But, you know, PCS doesn't do it for free, and they retain the fees, but they as well obtain the fee for the test, and then they pay the test, you know, the federation or whoever it is that, you know, they pay them. That's how they, so it's a one-stop shop, and it's one fee that's paid.
How much
then
is the
PCS
PT? How much is the PT?
You know, I don't know.
The exam, I can't remember how much it is. I'll give you an example for ASWB, this is a social work board. They wanted to increase their fees for the license, and it was built in, not the license, the exam, and it was built into our contract that if they wanted to increase any fees, it had to go through us. So they had to ask us for permission. So that language was built into our contract
The
with
agreement that we have with
Could we
ASW.
do that as well? Could we
Yes.
could we limit the, no, we couldn't limit the fee.
You can limit the fee, but basically what they do, and you do have to take this into consideration as well. The cost of living, everything increases. So they have to justify, it's not just that they're going to say, well, we want to increase our fees, they have to justify that to us. And they justified it, so we allowed them to do it. But other states as well had to weigh into this as well. Weigh into the increased cost. They said it was increased costs. I'm not sure what specifically the costs were, but they explained that to us and we were okay. And they increased it, I'm not sure, it wasn't a significant, it wasn't
Yeah.
like $150 or whatever, but they did increase it. But there was language in their contract that required them to obtain permission from us in order to be able to do that.
The other
I
thing
guess- I
is
guess-
this contract has a standard term, which is normally 3 years. So
Yeah.
that even if you missed that in the iteration of your contract, it would conclude at a, definite time, and you could either rebid it, or if there was an option to renew.
So
you
I
could
guess
exercise
this issue is more dramatic than what we're used to, because I'm used to someone signing up for national certification. They send in their form, they could take, so there's no procurement, you pay the fee, you
That's
take
right.
the
It's a
exam.
private.
Right, so this is a whole different process.
That's right.
Yes,
That's right.
it's different. I think that what you're thinking of, someone wants to take an exam, maybe they're going to go to whatever state they need to go to. So they apply to take this exam, they take it, they pass it, and if that
It makes
particular
sense, yes.
state requires it, then
Right.
they'll just send them
Right.
the score.
Yeah.
That's not what we do here.
Okay, this is
It's totally different. The board the agency as well wants to ensure that the exam is being proctored, the security is adequate, and that it's a fair process for everyone who's taking the exam,
But
who's going to be
if
licensed
this
in
board
the state.
took in national, the NCETM exam,
From the Federation or NCB?
let's say we took the NCB, would that process would still be the same?
It would be the same.
It would still be the same, and just to be fair,
I know.
TM may not even want to
Right.
enter into a contract with
I
us.
see.
So they may not even bid for this. It may just be the federation that ends up bidding for our services. Anyone who wants to bid can do so, but there are certain perimeters that we establish as well that they are going to have to comply with. And if they're unwilling to do that, then they don't get the
So this
contract.
procurement thing is specific to Massachusetts, and so it would be.
Yes.
Okay.
You're right.
Any state.
Yeah, that's right, it could be any state.
Other states might not require it.
Just as a general proposition too, you should just be aware that other boards some boards use a national state board-based exam, and others use a certification exam. So either one of those are used by other boards. There's no one pathway to, one is better than the other, so you really should consider it based upon, I would think, just sort of the information that you get,
Yeah.
and then obviously the response to the kids that we
And
get.
can we cap I guess my question is, can we cap the fee in our,
For the
Duration
period
of the contract.
Duration of the contract, yes.
Yes.
We can't
And
set the
look,
fee.
the fee has not gone up in 20 years for the NCB pretty much, it's been around that same amount for like 20, 25 years.
this is Massachusetts, right?
No, all over the country, I'm saying, I'm saying the fee is based on what it costs to run tests.
Okay.
This is Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. Okay, so let me, again, my question, a physical therapist comes and has successfully passed the
Yeah.
exam,
Yeah.
has submitted credentials in order to take the exam,
Yeah.
then comes to the Board of Physical Therapy.
They don't go to the board, that's why I think it's unique in that PCS basically does everything
Everything.
for
Okay.
us. So
Yeah.
the application they obtain from PCS, they fill out the application in PCS. PCS basically does what Micah will do is will review the application. If they checked off yes that they've been convicted of a crime within a certain amount of time, they send that to the board.
That gets-
If they're concerned
have
about
a-
some
If they have a
education,
transcript from a foreign jurisdiction,
Okay.
that may get
So
kicked
they
back
take
to us,
those-
or they may send it out for foreign credential review. So
Mhm.
depending upon the complexity of the situation, sometimes they can handle it on their end, sometimes they kick it back to us.
and then
as
the
an
board
agency.
will review that. The PCS, we have them for allied health, we have them for chiropractors, we have them for
PCS.
optometrists, we also have them for podiatrists as well. It's professional credentialing services. So they have a website, if anyone is interested in licensure in Massachusetts, They have the requirements, they have the regulations, they have links to all of that information so that if people are interested in becoming licensed, they know what the requirements are. So they review the educational